Shūmon Kattōshū第46則無事の樹無種の義勇の長がに両院禅寺無事に題して称して曰く上宿しも仏性万丈生山皇居に閣楼正客の橋対等に入るハッピのなた奨励用構図 Entangling Vines, Case 46, Part 2. A verse on Jōshū's Mu. Zen Master Chugan Ryoin of Koshu wrote the following verse on the koan Mu. Jōshū's dog, a dog has no Buddha nature. Endless blue mountains hide in the ancient mirror. Barefoot Persians enter the land of China. Eight-armed Narakuvara follows the true teaching. Please feel free to move if you have to. And if anyone could give me an indication that you're actually hearing what I'm saying, I would be grateful for that. Also at Rinzai-ji in the Zendo. Welcome everybody. It's wonderful to be here together in this fashion. Of course, I very much would like to be there in person, as so many of us would like to be. But sometimes it is not possible to just get all our wishes and predilections met by this universe or by what is unfolding. Nonetheless, this miraculous technology that we have here that sends invisible particles and knows how to distribute them so that pictures and sound appears all over this world. It's nothing short of a miracle. What is even more miraculous than that is the wonderful heart-to-heart connection that we all have that brings us together here on this day, in this Hō-On Sesshin, in the session that every year we hold to not only give thanks, but to repay the dharmic debt that we have inherited by having been exposed to this wonderful teaching of Shakyamuni Buddha, of all the human beings who came after Shakyamuni, and all the human beings who are with us right now. So you might wonder, what is this business of teishō? Many of us remember sitting through teishō with Jōshū Rōshi for many years, often sleepy, sometimes too hot, sometimes too cold. But nonetheless, he always climbed the high seat, no matter how old, sometimes even no matter how sick, to embody the teaching that he had received. And that was his act of requiting the beneficence, of paying back and paying forward. And of course, giving teishō is not a matter of choice for me either. It is what the function that I had vowed to embody asks to be done. I also don't have a choice of what koan will I speak about today. There is no koan menu where you can order a la carte. I've committed myself to treat all the cases of the Shūmon Kattōshū, the Entangling Vines, which is a collection of koans that is a little bit different than the traditional ones that we know that have come from China. Most of us here in the Rinzai school of Zen are familiar with the main collections, the Gateless Gate, Mumon Kan, and of course, the Blue Cliff Record, Heikigan Roku. Those collections follow the Chinese literary tradition of commenting on the cases. And I'm sure when you recall yourself opening up the Blue Cliff Record, there is in the beginning a pointer that leads then to the main case, the Honsoku, and it's followed by further commentary and by verses. And not just by one person, but by successive generations of Zen practitioners. It goes so far that there are annotations all the way down to Hakuin Zenji, who lived in the 17th century. The Shūmon Kattōshū, Entangling Vines, is a little different. It is a collection of just the main cases. There is no pointer. There are no verses and no commentaries. So it's a pretty bare bones collection of these, it's over 200 and almost 280 koans. And now, at this point, we have reached case 46. Case 46 is a central case, and there are 6 parts to the Shūmon Kattōshū relating to this case 46. The first one is basically the main case of Jōshū's move. So in order to speak about the second part of this case 46, I would like just to dwell a little bit on Jōshū and the main case. You know, in the traditional Japanese way of the Hakuin curriculum, or basically the ways to follow the koans, koan study is so much more in that Japanese context than what we have encountered here. And it's not necessarily, it's just different. Let's not look at it from any kind of judgmental point of view. It is, to a certain degree, an educational tool, because first of all, I'm sure if you look at that sheet, you see it's all just Chinese characters. First, one has to figure out, oh, what does that mean? Not only what does it mean, but also one has to learn how to read it. It's not Japanese, it's not English. So there is an attention that one has to give that textual component that is quite different than picking out an English koan from a book printed and just reading it. The monks and the practitioners who go to Sanzen, who do Shitsunai Sanzen, who do koan practice with a Zen Rōshi, they have to memorize the whole thing than how it is read in Japanese. You remember going into Sanzen, there are basically 2 prostrations, and the third one is a deep bow with your hands in the teishō position. And while your head is down, you recite your case to the teacher. That is part of the training. So it's important to understand that there is this kind of, well, let's call it a performative component to the traditional koan study. It is more than just content. It is also learning the form and following a very specific tradition. Tea ceremony, Ura Senke, Omote Senke, Hitsudo, Shodo, the writing of Chinese and Japanese calligraphy also follows very, very strict rules and very specific forms. So this is what I would say we can see here as a parallel. It's very Japanese, yes, it is. So one learns that case, and it happens to be the case 1 in the Gateless Gate, the Mumonkan. In the Shūmon Kattōshū, the case is called Jōshū Muji, Jōshū's Mu. In the case 1 of the Mumonkan, it's called Jōshū Kushi, Jōshū's puppy dog. It really doesn't matter too much. But the case, the main case that we have in the Shūmon Kattōshū has not just the first part that we find in the Mumonkan. A monk asked Jōshū, does a dog have Buddha nature or not? Jōshū answered, Mu, which means not, no, have not. In the Shūmon Kattōshū, it goes on further. More responses by Jōshū to the monk, who follows up, asking about the teachings. Well, doesn't every sentient being have Buddha nature? And so it goes on. Even a second part comes in where another monk asks Jōshū, does a dog have Buddha nature or not? And Jōshū answered, which is affirmative. Yes, has. Again, more questions follow up. It's not so important that we know this case in detail. Mumon's first Honsoku, the main case, is really the most important. So we would go in, we would bow down with our head down, and we would recite the case, Jōshū Osho, Jinamini Soto, Gushi ni kaete, Bussho ari yamata inaya, Su iwaku, Mu. A monk asked Jōshū, does a dog have Buddha nature or not? Jōshū answered, Mu. Oh, you can imagine it's 6 cases dealing with Mu. It's a long stretch. On the other hand, many of us remember sitting through Daiseshin after Daiseshin on case 1 of the Mumonkan. And Rōshi, Jōshū Roshi, following his usual way of speaking about the teachings of Tathagata Zen over and over, telling us no matter how often I repeat myself, you still don't get it. But today I would also like to look a little bit at this other Jōshū, Jōshū Jushin, who appears in this case. Jōshū Jushin lived from 778 until 897 in this common era. I don't know if you're good at math, but that is 119 years. It's a pretty long time. And Kyōzan Jōshū lived from 1907 107 years. Although their characters, the kanji in the names are different. I remember Jōshū Rōshi always aspiring to outlive Jōshū Jushin. And I'd say by us being here and coming together to honor his teaching, that has its life. So he's outliving and living together. Neither he nor Jōshū Jushin actually have ever disappeared. In this Shūmon Kattōshū of over 270 cases, 25 deal with Jōshū. You will also know from the other collections, the Mumonkan and the Hikigan-roku, the Gateless Gate and the Blue Cliff record, that there are many cases that deal with this great Chinese Zen master Jōshū. We know from the Dentō-roku, which is the collection of all the biographies of the Zen masters of old, that Jōshū's family name was Hei. He became a student of Nansen Fugan at the age of 18 years. Nansen Fugan, another great Zen master. Most of us probably just know him for holding up the cat. And finally, in the koan, cutting it into two. Nansen's sickle is another quite famous koan. So Jōshū and Nansen, they were quite a pair, a combination of Zen masters that is rarely found again in history. Even though Jōshū awakened in the first year of being with Nansen at the age of 18 years, Jōshū stayed with Nansen for 40 years, 4 decades. Not only 4 decades, but after Nansen Fugan passed away, Jōshū Jushin stayed at Nansen's place and took care of his grave for another 2 years. That relationship that we have with our teachers is different for each of us. And let me tell you, from this collection of Jōshū's sayings, the Jōshū Goroku, there are about 450, over 450 of Jōshū Jushin's sayings that are collected and that were translated into English at some point. And it also reports about how Jōshū met his teacher Nansen. Jōshū went to meet Nansen. He heard about Nansen Fugan. And he arrived, and Nansen was lying on his bed in his chamber. He heard Jōshū coming, sat up and asked, "Where have you come from?" Jōshū said, "From Zuiso, the figure of bliss temple." Nansen asked, "Have you seen the figure of bliss?" Jōshū answers, "No, if the figure of bliss I have not seen. A lying Buddha I have seen." At this, Nansen stood up and asked, "Do you have a master already?" Jōshū answered, "I have." Nansen continued, "Who is your master?" Jōshū said, "Although winter is past its peak, it is still very cold. May I suggest, my master, that you take good care of your body?" Jōshū picked Nansen. Instant recognition. Instant heart-to-heart connection. Beyond the need of any more words. Soon after this, Jōshū awakened. When he awakened, he said, "Suddenly I was ruined and homeless." Well, that's not a great advertisement for this practice, is it? You want to awaken and be ruined and homeless? Well, apparently. Otherwise, we wouldn't be coming here. Ruined, what is ruined? With the awakening, with the letting go of any kind of fixated identity, of an ego entity, of all of that. That is what's ruined. Our stories that we carry with us all the time, that we replay in our heads over and over while we are sitting in Zazen, just to remind ourselves who we are in case we forget. Sometimes we just want to forget. Ruined like that. And homeless. No home means your home, our home, unfolds everywhere. And that is not just a platitude, a saying, but that is an embodiment that this practice can teach us. Jōshū had his own personality, of course. Like each of us, we have our own personality. What he did not really like at all is anything abstract. It's very rarely found, even in the history of Zen, any other master or teacher who had so little faith in the declaration of truth. Of course, the Buddha did not declare anything more than 4 noble truths. Everything else that is speculation, hypothetical, he never engaged in. Very important teaching that we can take to heart. Jōshū had really deep faith in our humanity, into our human spirit, in the human heart. He said, if the right person preaches the wrong way, the way will follow the person and become right. If the wrong person preaches the right way, the way will follow the person and become wrong. This putting our deeds where our words are is really important. That is what Jōshū is telling us here. In some more Abrahamic terms, is preaching water and drinking wine. You might be familiar with that saying. That was Jōshū. He didn't really talk that much, but when he talked, it is said that the golden words emitting light exited his mouth. His lips were golden. And he was really funny too. Very humorous. Once when Jōshū was at Master Nansen's place, Nansen entered the meditation hall and went around the hall leading a cow. The head monk hit the cow's back 3 times. Nansen immediately stopped. Later, Jōshū got up and put a bundle of grass in front of the head monk. The head monk was speechless. In this case, the head monk, maybe he had too much in his head. He certainly learned what it means to act and to make relationship with that cow. But then when it came to the point to become the cow and eat the grass, there was a head monk in the way. And that is what Jōshū showed him. No words were exchanged. Isn't it often that we ask for words? Give me the word. Tell me the word. How many books have we looked in for the right word to unlock something? And maybe sometimes it works. I would not speak against words, but the words themselves are not what is being unlocked. So when asked about his teachings, Jōshū said to his students, if you are asked, what does Jōshū teach? Just say, when cold, cold. When hot, hot. Still, students continue to ask for words. When asked for his word, Jōshū said, there isn't even half a word. Students don't give up. They continue to ask, Master, but are you not here? And Jōshū said, yes, but I'm not a word. Wonderful. Here's one more from the Jōshū Roku. A monk asked, what is the essence of essences? Jōshū said, for how long have you been essencing yourself up? The monk said, I have been concerned with essence for a long time. Jōshū addressed the assembly and said, he is lucky to have me. The fool was almost essenced out. This is Jōshū's spirit. Jōshū's spirit, which we find in, of course, the Mu koan. Does a dog have Buddha nature or not? So it might be helpful just to share a little bit. What does the Hakuin koan study look like? You know, historically speaking, after Hakuin Ekaku, together with Torei Enji Zenji, his successor Gasan Jito, then the lineage split into two branches. One is the Inzan branch, Inzan Ien, that is the branch to which Jōshū Rōshi belonged. So his dharma was the Inzan lineage, and the other one was Takuju Kosen, where many other people are in that lineage as well. So these are the two flavors of the Hakuin lineages nowadays, and they have a little difference in how koans are used. The Inzan lineage, where Jōshū Rōshi uses koans much more freely. We experience that by Jōshū Rōshi creating his own koans and working with them with us. In the Takuju lineage, It's a little more much following a specific path. But still nowadays, even there, what is appropriate for the student will be chosen. And there are different flavors or types of koans. And it's important to understand that this first koan, Mu is one type of koan that we call the Dharmakaya koans, Hōshin koans. Or if I wanted to give you an English word for it, it's an immersion koan. An immersion koan because it calls for a practice where we completely immerse ourselves in that main question, in that main part, the wato, the word head, or however you want to call it, that question that stands behind this koan. For Mu, it can be any question. Mu is just one of those Dharmakaya koans. If you really have this deep-seated question about this world, about yourself, who am I? Who am I? Or what is this? What is this? Or if you go with Bankei, who hears? Who hears? Who is hearing? Who is hearing? Who is seeing? These are all koans that call us to give ourselves completely up into that process of staying with the koan. And immersion is complete immersion, nothing else. Single-mindedly, one dedicates one's own mind and life to the exploration of that. It's not a mantra that one repeats, because a mantra is usually repeated with some kind of intention. Here, it's more the questioning that stands with it, this openness of being receptive to what unfolds. So one way for Mu is to repeat it on the exhalation in our zazen all the way out. That's one way. In certain traditions, you go out and you shout Mu, or you just repeat it all day long. It is like introducing a virus into your operating system of self. It messes with it. And since it messes with this functioning of the understanding of self and of who I am, what this process of identification is, it's important to practice these Dharmakaya koans in a safe environment. Sitting in the Zendo, participating in a retreat like this is a safe environment. Letting everything go but this big, great doubt, that great question mark that moves us forward here, is what we can take advantage of. If you're not an officer, just follow whatever the signals ask you to do. Just sit when it's time to sit and dig into that question that you have. Nothing else matters. That is the Hōshin type of koan, complete immersion. Should you go home as a part-timer, when you sit down in your car, no, don't do your Dharmakaya koan. Drive. When you cross the street, make sure you don't get run over. That is not a resolution of any of these Dharmakaya koans, to get run over. Even Dogen Zenji, who most of us think of just in the context of the Soto school. When he went to China, of course, he went at the same time as Eisai, Yosai, Myoan Yosai, or Myoan Eisai. And he had background, of course, in Rinzai. He said about this koan mu, this single story has a truth to be studied. Do you thoroughly understand this truth? And then after a pause, he continued. Buddha nature has a nose to grasp, but a dog does not have horns to be held. With Buddha nature not avoiding entry into a skin bag, cats give birth to cats. We are in this skin bag here. Yours might look a little different, but that's what we are born into. So 40 years they stayed together. That is a very long time. You might recall, if you're one of the students, the disciples of Jōshū Rōshi, when Jōshū Rōshi and you met, for how many years, and no matter how many, it always seemed not enough. But here we are, alive, skin bags, with eyes, ears, hearts, and thoughts. Do we have Buddha nature? Shūjō honrai hotoke nari mizu to kori ni gotoku nite mizu wo hanarete kori naku shūjō no hoka ni hotoke nashi. Hakuin Zenji's Song of Zazen begins that way. Sentient beings are fundamentally Buddhas. It is like ice and water. Apart from water, no ice can exist. Outside sentient beings, where do we find the Buddhas? We are very fortunate at Rinzai-ji to have senior practitioners come and lead Zazenkais. Even if you can't go, it's very helpful to listen to the talks that the various leaders of these meetings give. And Jōshū, he said one thing when he went on pilgrimage, and that's an important point. After the 40 years and the 2 years of tending to Nansen's grave, at the age of 60, what did Jōshū do? He went on pilgrimage. He went on pilgrimage all over China to meet other teachers, to study with other teachers, to just confer. And his pilgrimage was undertaken in the spirit that he said, if I meet a 7-year-old child that has deeper understanding than I will humbly become their student. If I meet a 100-year-old person who has less depth of understanding than I have, I will gladly share. At age 60, going on to this pilgrimage, Angya, for another 20 years. Jōshū arrived at age 80 when he started a monastery. That's where the name Jōshū comes from the place where the monastery, the temple, was erected. And from there, 80 until 119, well, that's another 39 years of teaching. Tireless, never tired of his own undertaking to get to the bottom of all of this. Riding in the boat on that stream of Dharma. And when we ride in this boat on the stream of Dharma, if we think too much, if we philosophize too much, this is like trying to mark the position of the boat in the stream by cutting scores on the side into one of the boards. Here I am in the river. Doesn't work that way. Your score is deep enough, your boat will sink. But the river continues. So Jōshū immersed himself into this practice and became this great figure that inspired poems like the one by Chigan-kutsu, a person we don't really know much about. We know that he lived in Koshu or Mushu, depending on how you read it. And he wrote this verse that is the central point of this koan today. Jōshū's "A dog has no Buddha nature," pointing straight to this case where Jōshū did not give an answer. Mu doesn't mean that does not have. Mu is a pointer to non-duality. Non-duality. Now, before speaking a little bit, just briefly about this verse, I wanted to close the loop with listening to the recordings of whoever leads a retreat here at Rinzai-ji. Please listen to it. There are wonderful gemstones in there from practitioners who have practiced a long time. And especially when they're expressed as their own life of what this practice has brought them to. It is inspiring, it is ennobling, and it is one of those wonderful ways of paying this dharmic debt forward. In one of those, Kendo Roth pointed out Nishida Kitaro, the philosopher who lived in Japan, the Kyoto school, pointed out to Western students of philosophy that there's a big difference in the approach of understanding self and consciousness in the Western philosophy and in the Eastern view. In Western philosophy, there is this underlying thought that there is a self out of which consciousness arises. And Nishida Kitaro told those students, it's completely the other way in the Asian way of looking at it. There is consciousness out of which a self and self-consciousness arises. It is similar with Mu. We try often very hard to think of transcending duality. How do we transcend duality? And that already sounds that there is something beyond duality. But what we learn in this practice, through many arduous years of sitting, of living, is that it's again the same thing. There is non-duality out of which duality arises. this non-dual state of not being anywhere else than where we are, of giving up any idea of self-reference, of other, is something that rises out of this underlying Buddha nature of non-duality. Non-duality doesn't mean there isn't dark and light. Non-duality means when it is dark, it is dark. When it is light, it is light. And duality comes into existence in the moment when it is light and we think, oh, I'm afraid of the dark. Or when it is dark, oh, when will the light come? So in our poem, the endless blue mountains hide in the ancient mirror points exactly to this phenomenal world. All phenomena come from this underlying Buddha nature of non-duality. Barefoot Persians enter the land of China can be interpreted in many different ways. Technically, could be different meanings, but some people think, well, the Persian, that must be Bodhidharma, but others say it just means sometimes this phrase is interpreted that to act ostentatiously or foolishly. We act ostentatiously and foolishly. I am acting ostentatiously and foolishly right now, trying to talk about this, and I beg your forgiveness for it. But the next line of the eight-armed Nalakuvara follows the true teaching, points to one of these tutelary deities, the Buddhist deities that were introduced in China. And this Nalakuvara is basically a legendary female goddess having 5 heads and 8 arms, immense strength. And it helps this Nalakuvara. It atoned for the transgression of her parents by offering its own bones and flesh to basically Hō-On Sesshin, to requite the beneficence that they had received. What that means, we are called here to throw our own skin back, bones, flesh, heart, ideas, consciousness into this practice of immersion that without doubt will lead us to the point, each of us, where we meet this non-duality, where Jōshū Rōshi, Jōshū Jushin, Nansen, and the Buddha shake hands. I have talked enough. I have ostentatiously and foolishly taken your time. I will yield it back to us and let us sit together in silence and meet where nobody meets nobody.